Welcome to MamaFuel, the podcast that fuels every mama's heart, soul, mind, and body, and hopefully sparks a few dreams along the way. I'm Ann Ferguson, Chief Nurturer and Mama Mentor at the Centered Mama Project, and your host for this podcast. I'll be sharing real, raw, and often funny conversations with beautiful mamas from around the world to remind you that you're not alone and that you're doing amazingly on this wild journey of shepherding small humans as they make their way on our beautiful planet. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to today's episode of MamaFuel, the podcast. I am Ann Ferguson, your host, and I am thrilled to present to you my friend and fellow mama, Karolyn McKinley. Karolyn and I met 2 years ago, almost 3 now, in a group led by an amazing woman who is also going to be on the podcast. Not sure at time of recording if she'll be on after or before Karolyn, because we haven't recorded yet, so I haven't scheduled everything. And in the context of keeping it real, I don't know if she'll come first or after. But we met in Elena Lipson's group where we were focusing on self-love. And that was really my first foray into, oh my God, it's okay for me to take time for me. And oh my God, it's okay for me to think about other stuff than my kids. And oh my God, I'm an educated woman. And yet this was news to me. And Karolyn was also a part of that group and a beautiful leading light and inspiration because she has a now 23-year-old son who's just gotten married. She's on another part of motherhood, another part of his journey. And it was really, really helpful to me to talk to Karolyn, both as a woman. She's extraordinary. She's a therapist. She is also a transformational coach. She has just such deep experience and curiosity about how people work and how our minds work and why we make the decisions we make and why we do the things we do and how it impacts our relationships. And it was like having a wise, slightly, not much, but a little bit older mama around to advise and to share information. And I just really valued all of the connections that I have with Karolyn. So I'm thrilled, Karolyn, that you've agreed to join us today. And I thank you and welcome to MamaFuel.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. And I am so happy that you're doing this because I've been watching the whole unfolding of your focus on mamas and since our time in Elena's group, which was fantastic and was sort of a business mastermind in addition to the self-care that we learned inside of that group. So
yes, totally.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been a heck of a journey since then, but let's focus on you. So tell us what your family and your life looks like right now, because it's just been a big change, right?
Oh my gosh. Yes. So my son just got married. He, just this past weekend, and I'm still recovering from all of that. There was quite a bit of, planning involved in that. It was a totally DIY Pinterest perfect wedding.
Oh, yeah.
But as the mother of the groom, what do I do? Just show up and I help. I didn't have to do all of the planning, but it was I don't know if you can prepare for something like this. And especially for me, since it's my only child and it's a son versus a daughter. So there's a lot of different emotions that came up, and also recognizing that in essence, my parenting duties are over in the bigger scheme of things. And it was so interesting because at the wedding, I'm meeting all of his friends. There's his high school friends, his college friends, his work friends, the new family, and they all know him in a different context.
Yeah.
And so, I know him. He comes home and he's what he got to eat, look in the fridge, hanging out. And I'm still mom. But when I saw him at the wedding and all the events around that, I saw the man. And it was incredible. And so many people came up to me and told me what a wonderful man he is. Well, of course I knew that, but I'm his mom, right? So, but to really see the impact he's had on other people in his community was just, it made me feel like despite all the struggle I had, but because I've been a single mom for 17 years, it made me understand that despite some of the hardships some challenges involved with that. That what really mattered was that I did my best to raise somebody who was emotionally connected, and that this was a man who I wanted to inculcate a sense of, like, he would honor and cherish and love and adore this woman, support her in being the best person she could be. And that was my job, Yeah. And I feel like we accomplished that, myself and his father, who was also there. Wonderful, wonderful guy. So it was really amazing. It was really amazing.
What an amazing and hugely pivotal moment in your journey as a mama, because you've shared with me, and maybe you can share with the listeners, what was your journey like from being, footloose and fancy free and living life large to becoming a mom? Not that that's not living life large, but it was a heck of a gear shift for you, wasn't it?
Well, absolutely. And it's funny because I don't know, I was just out of college and I was, footloose, fancy free, didn't really know what I was doing. And then I started dating Will's dad, who I actually knew in college. Yeah. And so all of a sudden, everything got really serious. I really didn't see myself as being married young. Yeah. And young to me is 25. But he was everything. And this is probably something a lot of people can relate to in your audience, is that when we marry young, we typically marry because we're marrying somebody who represents the needs that we didn't get growing up, didn't get met. Mm-hmm. So he had this, I love my parents, are still together, 60 some years later. But they worked all the time. Yeah. Work. That was the focus. And his parents were like sort of semi-retired, and they had a boat and all these family, big family and all of that. And so it was really appealing. And he was solid. He had a good job. He had a house, He was a couple, 2-3 years older than I was. And so to me, it represented this real stable situation. Yeah. And good person and all of that. So, in adventure, we went on hikes. Like, my first bike ride was, well, let's back up. My first hike was the Grand Canyon for 7 days.
Wow.
With him. My first long bike ride was 4 months in Australia and New Zealand.
Wow.
I know, it was so out of shape. But, it was exciting. So anyway, our journey started with really solid foundation. And then his company was going to move us across the country to a place that neither one of us wanted to live. And so he quit. And that's when we went to Australia. We just stopped and quit, got on a bike, and we were going to sort it all out. Well, when we got back to the States, we had to really just start over, and we decided, let's go to California. Mm. And he was working in a bakery, in a bike shop, and I was working in a natural food store. But I also had it's like we went backwards, but not really. It was sort of like a slingshot, like go backwards to go forwards. I ended up going to graduate school and getting my psych degree, or my counseling degree, because that's something that I knew. I knew at 14 what I wanted to do. I was one of those kind of people. Yeah. So, got through graduate school and realized we didn't want to stay in California. So we moved back to Seattle, where our families were. And that's when I got pregnant. And that was, and a lot of moms in your audience can probably relate to this. The first pregnancy was a miscarriage. Mm. And what was good about that, it was still kind of like upsetting, but it wasn't planned. So right. I wasn't ready. And we had waited, we'd been married by maybe about 9 years by then. Mm. And I worked with kids my whole life, since high school and in graduate school and undergrad. And I was working, just newly had a job. I'm like, I can't be pregnant, right? I just started my job, all this kind of stuff. Yeah. Like, I work with kids. And it's so funny to me because I laugh because these parents that I was working with, because I work with families and children, they must have just been scratching their head. Oh, who are you? Why should I listen to you? You haven't had children yet, right? And it's true. I had no understanding of the complexity of being a mother. Mm-hmm. So we tried again relatively soon after, and I had, so I'm, of course, so grateful that it all worked out. He's amazing. And what I didn't learn in graduate school, even as a child and family therapist, but I was also a marriage and child family therapist. That's my official title. We didn't get a lot of good training in the couples therapy part. Mm. And this is what I'd like all you ladies out there, moms listening, is that there is this window of time when your child, like you're shifting from this couple to this family. Mm. And women tend to become very family focused, child focused, right? Because we have to take care of this helpless little baby who can't talk. Mm-hmm. And we're really good at understanding the signals because that's the way our brain is designed. And so we put all of our focus on the children, and I'm working with children and children everywhere, right? Yeah. Took the focus off the relationship. Mm. So the most vulnerable time for your relationship is when your children are 0 to 6 years old, because that's the most time intensive, and you don't sleep, and you don't tend to take care of yourself. Everything goes to the child, and so we ended up drifting apart, and I didn't know how to fix it. I got really sick, and no doctor knew what it was at the time back in the 80s. Now I know a lot more about all of what was going on. My immune system was crashing. And so in my exploration of trying to figure out what was going on with my health, I dove back into another great love of mine besides my child is just my spirituality and all of the practices. And so I, through doing that, I reconnected to a part of myself that I neglected throughout my whole marriage because I thought it was too woo, and I had to be the good wife and go biking and skiing and all that kind of stuff. And I hid that. So that was part of what was going on that was impacting my health, is hiding so much of who I was, thinking it wasn't
didn't have a value, maybe.
Yeah, or safe or something like that. So anyway, that really put a big strain on the marriage, and eventually then we ended up splitting up, separating for 4 years before we finalized the divorce. Yeah. And in looking back, again, there's a lot that I could have done differently. And it's funny because I'm a counselor, right? And we did get counseling and all.
Yeah, but
it was
theory in life is not the same.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Big source of shame for me. So I just made a vow at that point that I was going to figure this out. And just like I became a better child and family therapist because I had a child, then I just said, okay, I'm going to be a better couples therapist, going to really figure out what works. And that's what I went on to do. So, and I was fortunate enough to have a really great ex who was very, had a lot of honor and integrity around the parenting part, the co-parenting part. And so he was very supportive. It just was that we probably should have just been like, we're good friends, but there's a lot more that goes into being a good couple and creating intimacy. And instead of being like parallel play partners, you have to be able to go to do the hard places to be able to communicate, to have effective conflict resolution skills. And we just didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
And neither one of us grew up with it either. So
how did you build support around yourself? I mean, you said you went back home to Seattle where your families were. How did you build support around yourself? Because a lot of the moms listening will be single, or maybe I know a few cases where, well, I don't know a few cases. It happens all the time where people are maybe thinking and thinking, gosh, is this the place that I want to stay? Do I want to remain in this relationship? Should I stay in it for the kids? Etc. How did you build the village around you? What did you do to support you and Will through this transition and he was 6 when you guys split up, so it's been a while.
Yes. And just FYI, it's actually in some ways a lot easier the younger they are. And the research kind of proves that, like, the longer you have a relationship with 2 parents in the house, and the kid is, has more history with you, the more challenging it can be for them in the long run. I think the hardest, like the kids that are most upset by divorce are in college.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, my whole life.
My whole foundation.
My whole life. Like,
happened in our family.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, right? Okay, so I guess I want to say to any mother that is out there in any kind of circumstance like this where they're looking at their marriage and all of that, please do whatever you can, first of all, to find a really great therapist that you can work with. Please, please, please do that for your kids primarily, okay? Do what it takes. And if it doesn't work out, then you got to take care of yourself in ways that you wouldn't understand or know about when you're in a couple. So one of the things that was so shocking to me, and it's like the dirty little secret of divorced people, is that you realize the time that the children are away is your time for you.
Totally. I've heard this before. I've heard this from a mom not too long ago who was like, half the time, I don't have to do anything for anybody. It's just time for me to do my own stuff. And obviously there's pain and there's sadness and there's a huge amount of grief and all of the challenge of, the kids processing. But in one particular case, it was a mama who had initiated the separation. And she was like, I have 50% of my time back. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild, but that's the thing that can help you refuel. Because in truth, even though we moved back here to Seattle to be closer to family, we were in between families. So his family lived 2.5 hours away to the east, and my family lived 2.5 hours to the south of us.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay.
So we really didn't have family. So I had to rely on friends. And what was really great is he's in a school that had a lot of parent involvement. And we were required to volunteer. And so I'd made connections. And also one of the things I did was I took him to school every day and I picked him up every day. So there's always these opportunities to connect with other parents and teachers and whatnot. And I having the schedule I did as a therapist that I can make my own hours was wonderful, because then I would just flex my schedule around Will's schedule and be able to attend all the school events and do whatever it took. And also, I had a nice arrangement with his dad where I'd pick him up at school, hang out with him after school, and then I would take him to his dad's house while I went back to work, saw clients, and then I'd go back and pick him up, and he'd spend the night, and then I'd take him to school. Wow. So he saw his dad and me every day.
That's amazing.
Until he was
extraordinary and very unusual, I would say.
Very unusual, but we were both committed to making that work and putting aside any differences that we had to make that happen. So I do recognize that I have a special situation. Yeah. But we did put Will at the center of our co-parenting stuff. And then when we were off doing our own thing, okay, then yeah, because so. I mean, it's you say it's the dirty little secret of divorced people, and I'm confirming from what I've heard from some divorced people, but it isn't. That is not the case for some people who, the
dissolution of a marriage also is accompanied by huge amounts of depression and anxiety. And there's a lot of rebuilding that comes into it for everybody concerned, because the structure that you base everything on is now no longer in place. And then what does that mean about me? And is there was that a failure? And is there shame attached? And where did I go wrong? And what could I have done more? Or where did they go wrong? And what could they have done more? Or the circumstance, or what? Like it seems to me that there are crucial moments in life where you are perhaps more vulnerable to that kind of inner dialogue of something's wrong with me. I'm broken. Nobody wants me. No one will ever love me again. I can never love someone again. I made a huge mistake. I'll never find someone because I can't trust myself to get it right next time because I've got it so wrong this time, or whatever the stories are that we unconsciously build up and then attach to. And those moments are so vulnerable. So how did you find ways to fuel yourself and to build the exquisite woman that I have met a few years ago, and to come to this place of assuredness? And even then, we were all having wobbles in that group around our businesses and our what were we doing and how are we stepping out into the world? But how did you get from that place of like, oh wow, this deep structure that had been here for so long is now no longer, like, wife is not a part of my identity anymore?
Yeah. Well, the biggest surprise, I think, for me was that once I wasn't part of a couple, that other couples didn't include me. I'd have to insert myself, and that was really hard. And then I moved into a neighborhood that was all kids Will's age, and they were more inclusive, and just because we're neighbors. And I had to make an extra effort, though, to have the kids over and make sure that Will had a lot of play dates and stuff. So there's a lot more with that. But yet Will was also an interesting child in that he was perfectly content just hanging out on his own too, and so, and I just did as much as I could. His dad did a lot of stuff. So, but I think the biggest disappointment was we didn't have we didn't create the same memories that other so-called intact families have. They go on vacation together with another family, let's say, and all of that. That didn't happen. And so it's interesting to me to see that. And I think this is true for a lot of kids in his age group, is they're getting married younger and they're really focusing on family. They're wanting these strong connections. And so he's marrying into a family that's like huge. And because we had such a tiny family, I remember watching Lilo and Stitch. That movie, I love that movie. Yeah. And identified with that. We are, I can't remember how Stitch says it, but it's just like, we're small, but we love each other, basically. Yeah. So, and I don't know if I would have had the same relationship with Will had I still been married, because we're super tight and he could come to me for pretty much anything. So I think we have an exceptional relationship. He has a really great relationship with his dad, who taught him how to be in the world and in a masculine sort of way, and self-sufficient. And so again, it's interesting. Kind of got the best of both worlds. As far as myself is like looking at where did I fail? I think that, again, the biggest shame was I'm a therapist. I should have figured this out.
Says who?
Right?
Did they give you the marriage guidebook when you got your degree? Like, here you go, your marriage is going to have to work out just fine. Yeah.
And again, we both come from families that the parents stay together. So it wasn't, in my wheelhouse. I didn't have anybody, really any friends or anything like that had done this. So I was just kind of trying to figure it out as I went along. And I did bury myself in work and parenting. I must say, I didn't really think about dating, just because, remember, as I was saying earlier, there's this part of me that I had suppressed for so long that I was really exploring and taking a deep dive into. that was fulfilling on a lot of levels, that it didn't feel like something was missing per se, like a partner. Because I knew that if I left this partnership with my child's father, by God, the next one was going to be someone who does embrace and support and love all of me. And that I don't have to push that down. Yeah. And when we met was when I was still trying to do the traditional therapy, because, I'm now supporting myself.
Yeah, of course.
And it was just draining me. I was working insane hours, and my health took a dive again. And so that's when I met up with, I was trying to, I got to do something different. We'll do the online business thing because that sounds interesting, and I can do it from home, and works as a single mom. And yet I was still pretty depleted. And that's when I noticed Elena, our divine self-care mentor, had a mastermind that would include both. And I just knew that I had to address this. Like, I can't be telling my clients, take care of yourself, and not doing it.
Totally.
Right?
I know, the integrity piece to be there. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
You mentioned something earlier that I just wanted to circle back to, which is something that I had an experience of as well, which was this piece about how once you were no longer coupled, you were not included in all of the couple things. And I can relate to this because I was in a couple serious, we lived in a house together, and we had moved into a school district and had those conversations, and I thought we were set. Like this was it. And it became clear that we were on a different path, and he's an amazing guy and still is, now is a father of many, many small humans, and has an incredibly beautiful wife, and they're very happy. And like, they've all, we've all gone our separate ways and lived into what we really wanted to do, which is beautiful. But I remember that phase of life. I was 30, and in Toronto, that felt really old to not be married. 30 was just like, oh, my friends were starting to have babies, and wow, what was wrong with me was what was kind of going through my head. It was never going to happen. I knew everybody there was to know in a city of 4 million people. Right. And it just wasn't happening. And so one of my solutions was, well, I've always wanted to live somewhere else. I'm getting out of here. And I left. I went to live in the UK, which was the best decision ever. But I had that experience then as well of being like in Toronto, of suddenly, we get invited along to a couple things. And then even my closest friends would be like, oh, well, we got together with so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and their boyfriends or husbands. And I was like, I would have liked to go. What happened? Oh, well, we didn't think you'd want to come because... And so there was that aspect. And I then, having moved to the UK, was spending time with a colleague who had just moved into a new neighborhood, and she lived in a cul-de-sac. I'll never forget. She was there, newly divorced with her 2 kids. And she was, super pretty, very athletic, extremely outgoing, kind, really smart. And none of those things were serving her. And she was in this little cul-de-sac where they were super social, and one family had an event and invited all of the families except her and her kids. And when she said what happened, they said, well, the woman actually said, well, you're single and I don't want you around my husband. And right?
Oh my gosh.
But this is something that has come up. It came up for me in, when I was around 30, and like, everybody was happily coupled and still is. And like, so no interest in anybody else's anything. I just come out of my own storm. And I think about this woman in the UK she was just heartbroken. She was there and she was sad, and her relationship had dissolved, and she just needed the community around her, and she didn't get it. She got it to a point, but there was really that exclusion. And it's something that has come up again. I know that there are, divorced moms in our school community who probably don't get invited to do stuff because they're a 1 instead of being a 2. And that is something that I have such a strong reaction to that. And if we could change something, if we could make anyone listening who is coupled, maybe think differently about someone who is no longer in a couple. Because I think one of the things that happens, and maybe you can talk about this from your professional experience, but also just your personal experience, is that when we see a frailty in someone else, when we see a fracture in someone else or a rupture in a relationship, it's natural to then reflect on your own. And if you've got uncomfortable stuff happening, or if you've got some unspokens, or if you've got some challenges that you're not facing into, suddenly that person unintentionally holds up a big mirror, and it's easier to not spend time with the person than it is to actually face your own crap. I think that's the big thing. What do you think?
Bingo. That is it exactly. So if you're not solid in your relationship, you're right. I think there's that fear or potential. You feel threatened by somebody who's making this choice that you're not wanting to look at or wanting to choose, even if you had that sort of same. So like, what was difficult? Okay, I'll just state this: is there was no like obvious signs. Like, people were really surprised that we split up. They didn't have a context. Like, you either have to be in an abusive situation, or somebody's drinking or carrying on or whatever. Okay. So since we didn't have that, it was really hard for people to get their head around it. And it was a threat to their own relationship. Again, what I try to communicate to people is that it wasn't that we didn't love each other. We were on such different paths.
Yeah.
Like he said to me, I'm just a simple man. Can't you become enlightened in the next lifetime? I'm like, oh, okay.
No, it's happening right now.
I'm supposed to hold myself back, because that's what a woman does, and make sure the man gets to live the life that they choose for us. And I'm like, no, I can't actually.
Yeah.
I can't. And that's a hard thing for a woman to claim.
Still today, do you think?
In shame. Oh, absolutely. Because again, this was 17 years ago, but yeah, it's still true. I see it all the time in my practice. And what I have to help women understand is it's okay to have needs.
Yes.
They are just terrible at receiving. They can complain a lot or criticize, but I have to constantly ask them, okay, so what's the ask? What's the need? I don't know. So your guy can't show up for you if you don't ask for what you need.
What do you think that's about, though? What do you think that not, because I've seen this too with the women that I work with all over, is, well, what do you want? What is your dream? What do you do for fun? And it's just like the static between channels. If we're going to date ourselves, I think back to the TV we had in our basement, in Canada, and how we could only we had to move the antenna and turn the channels and hope that one of the 3 channels we got would come in clear that day. Like, it's just static. There's just nothing. And there's this blank look of, and my comment generally and very gently is, wow, well, it's really difficult for someone else to meet your needs if you can't, if you don't know what they are. They're always going to not get it right, because, you're always going to not get it right if you don't know what your own needs are. And B, if you can't communicate it, then, it's, you're setting everybody is being set up and setting themselves up for failure if we don't know what our needs are and what our dreams are and what our wishes are, and that we own those things, right? Because you can have them and, like, you lock them up and make them small, or you can claim them and take up the space.
Right. Exactly.
So here is a question for you. What have you seen are the consequences of women not taking up the space that is their right to occupy. And by that, I'm referring in part to a conversation that I know I'm going to be having very soon with a woman named Julie Creffield, who is a plus-sized runner. And she supports plus-size women to run and to get out there. And one of the issues, she's amazing. She's incredible. She's in the UK. Yeah. If you're listening, I'll put her down in the show notes. But if you're ever curious, and she actually started a company called Too Fat to Run, and she has these big T-shirts printed that say,
"Oh, I know who she is."
She's amazing. Yeah. She's amazing. Yeah. And she runs marathons. I mean, she runs circles around a lot of much less sizable people. She's incredible. And we have talked often as mothers of girls about the importance of teaching our girls to take up space. Because when you don't, what happens?
Yes. Well, my sense of like all of our suffering, all the pain and suffering that we create for ourselves and the world is due to three core things. I'm not lovable, I'm not enough, and I'm not worthy. That's it. It always comes down to that. And for women, we tend to ride, when in the self-esteem continuum, women tend to ride in shame, having a lot of shame for having needs. And there's a lot of pressure society places on us for wanting what we want, and delineating clear boundaries and limits. You know, we're a bitch, or we're this or that, you know, whatever it is. And things are changing. They're crumbling. It's really great. I'm excited for the girls coming up to have a different kind of world. And we're getting different role models being presented in these younger generation. The magic generation is what they're called, which I love. Oh, really? Yes, that's what they're called. So especially here in the United States, lots of really tough conversations going on, and it's very exciting. But for women my age and all, we're still under the got to be a good girl and not have needs, and so we burn ourselves out, right? And so we overextend ourselves, we just over everything, and hold ourselves to these impossible standards. We burn ourselves out over and over and over again, trying to be all things. And then we look at social media with these carefully curated images that are ridiculous standards to uphold. So, and we can even attack each other, which is truly unfortunate. And I've seen that happen a lot lately. Like
it happens a lot.
Know? Yeah. Like if the sisters are against each other, then what? So a lot of my work is helping both men and women, because men tend to ride in a more grandiose position because society tends to support that or reward that, which is, so we have to get people to come down from that and up from shame to this real sweet spot of your needs matter, so do mine. My needs matter and I count, so do yours. And we have healthy boundaries. Without the healthy boundaries and ability to state what we need, we just can't have a really strong, connected, intimate relationship. We're all just functioning from early childhood programming and adaptive strategies that we learned about how to get our needs met. For me, it was to not have needs and just be a caretaker. Yeah. Until I kind of cracked.
With so many girls, this is still the story of you're rewarded for taking care of others, rewarded for sharing, rewarded for being nice, rewarded for being polite, rewarded for having manners, rewarded for giving your stuff to somebody else, rewarded for letting people into your space, rewarded for being quiet, rewarded for all this stuff, which is changing. But, you know, this friend, Julie Creffield, that I mentioned earlier, we were talking about clothing, and she was saying that she went into a clothing store to buy some shorts for her daughter, which are impossible to find without being butt crack, revealers. Right. And especially for kids who have muscle and like shape, as does her daughter and as do mine. And she saw a t-shirt that said crazy but cute. And it was such she's 5. And so what is that message? So it's okay to be cute and small and entertaining, but if you try to get bigger or make noise or are noticed or have opinions or demonstrate leadership, you're crazy. Wow. So we're still on some level, that is still okay for a global apparel company to put on a girl's t-shirt. And yet we're trying to shift things, right? We're trying to shift things to take up all the space. As you're saying, you have needs. So do I. How can we meet somewhere where both of us get some of our needs met, because that's mutuality, right? Like that is right relationship versus dependency, martyrdom, codependency, and all of the other stuff, which, and this is something that I'm going to be writing about soon, is this martyr mama piece that we tend somehow weirdly to take on, even like, again, educated, modern, sophisticated women like you and me, and a lot of people I know, we still have these standards of who we should be and how we should behave as mothers and how we should show up in the world. And it's crap. Why? Who says? It's not true. Who says anymore? You know, like there's right. No, I don't want to do that anymore.
Well, and what kind of modeling are you giving your children?
Yep.
You know, both the boys and the girls, because the boys look at that as, oh, I just can be taken care of, and they turn into Peter Pans, you know, like they don't have to do anything for themselves or see you as something more than this woman who attends to all my needs. And so we're growing a whole crop of narcissists here. And let me tell you another thing for any woman out there that finds themselves in a relationship with a narcissistic man, which is toxic, is they tend to look for very successful, competent, independent, no needs women. So if you're doing that and your daughter's modeling you around that, they're going to be narc magnets. And again, I'm seeing more and more in that in my practice. I'm trying to unpack that for young women to understand. And it's surprisingly difficult to get them to really own their needs. And the way to repel narcissists is to first not get in a depleted state, because usually when you're in a depleted state, they come in and they love bomb you, and it feels so good because somebody's finally paying attention to me and bringing me gifts and doing all these nice things. But then as soon as you're hooked, then they start to eat away at your self-esteem, and you're not perfect enough and this and that. And then you start doubting yourself because you know you're so amazing and competent. You should figure it out. Must be something about me. And it's not. Yeah. So do not get depleted. Have really strong, healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
And just know if you have some needs and somebody's not meeting them, and it's not just because they just don't know, they weren't taught how to do that it's a next, get out of there, you know, don't try to shift or change that.
I think also making really sure that you don't get isolated, like making sure that you stay in your community and that you talk to people really openly and that you have places to go for a pulse check and to say, am I going crazy? Because, you know, these things are happening. And I think that that's true for anyone, whether in that situation or not, of making sure that we have that community. Like you were saying, when Will was little and you moved to the new neighborhood, you made the effort to go to the school every day and drop him off and pick him up. You could have put him on the bus. You made the effort to go and meet the moms and the dads and to go to the school stuff. And it's not possible for everybody. There are a lot of people whose financial realities make that beyond an impossible dream. If anyone who's listening is in that situation, this is not, you know, a Pollyanna-ish painting or drawing of circumstances, but we all have circumstances that are specific to us, and everyone has challenges. Everyone has challenges.
Oh yeah.
And so it's not a question, and that's one of my missions with this podcast is that as you listen, that maybe one day you'll have a moment where you go, oh my God, it's not just me, or that happened to me, or that sounds like me, or that's how I feel, and you never thought about it, or that's possible for me, or whatever the thing is, you know, to anyone who's listening or watching us on YouTube, which is also an option, to just know that we are all on this journey together, and sometimes we get lucky and connect into someone who's further along the path that we really have a strong connection with, and who can provide a little bit of guidance and can shine their flashlight back at us, not in our eyes, I mean on the ground. Not in a blinding us kind of way, but in a helping us kind of way. And, sometimes we'll connect with other moms who are, or other non-moms. I was talking earlier to someone, to Edie Hoffman, who is my first non-mom guest on the podcast. And it was all around how, we need to look sideways as well at other people, because just because somebody doesn't have kids doesn't mean they don't love them, and doesn't mean that they don't want to spend time with you and your kids. So where can we look? How can we, look sideways, forward, backward? How can we help the sisters up? How can we allow ourselves to be helped up? Because, you were saying, if the sisters are doing this, then what do we got? And this is really the time to shelve, I know in my deepest everything, this is the time to shelve the schoolgirl, the bullying and all of the comparing and the crap stories that we all carry. I have big, deep girl bully wounds all over me. And yet here I am taking a stand and saying, no, we need to show each other's show our imperfection, and we need to share that we're just really human and we're struggling, and it's okay, and we're human, and that's good, and let's do it together, because that's what life is about, and it's beautiful. And as Glennon Doyle says, it can be brutal. It's brutal and beautiful all at the same time, and we're in this together. And the more we are together, and the more we link arms and march together, or hold hands, or help each other with school pickup and drop off, or whatever, pick up. Today there was a mom at school. We had a high school information day, and one of the moms couldn't be there, and another mom was picking up all the information for her. That's awesome. She could have just not. I didn't even think about asking. She did, and she did it, and it's beautiful. And more of that community around the single mamas, maybe who are widowed, or who are divorced, or who are raising a child on their own. One of my first guests, Leslie Potter, who is also my parenting coach, adopted a child when she was 45. She's never been in a couple as a mama, and her daughter's now 18. So look around you, and as either the mama who had, we all have needs. Look around you and ask people, and see who you can help and who can help you, because it will make every one of us stronger. And we may have less need to resort to external therapy, which is completely something that I believe in and have done massively. And the work that you do is life-saving, truly. But if we have our really strong support networks, I think it makes us less vulnerable, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. So having that community, and not assuming just because, it's so funny, they're single mamas, especially folks that are perceived to have it together, successful, or whatever it is, they're actually the more vulnerable in a lot of ways, just because people assume that they're good, they're okay. And they're not good at reaching out and asking for support.
Nope. The super mama syndrome. Yeah,
exactly. So it's like times 10 when you're a single parent. And so I had a hard time with that. But I was surrounded, which was so, and they were all there at Will's wedding. I call them the aunties. Oh. A lot of my girlfriends who either are not partnered, or they have partnered but no children, they became my little family. All the women. And so they helped me raise Will. And just like you said, just because somebody doesn't have a kid doesn't mean that they can't contribute in some really fundamentally important way. And so it was just such a beautiful full circle moment around that. And then, yes, there's other families that were there that made the effort to still be inclusive of us, even though we are a non-traditional family. So I was so grateful for that. Takes a village sort of experience to help raise these children. And I think it's really important, and it's going to be a focus for me too, is raising emotionally intelligent, connected boys. Yeah, because they're so open, and then somewhere around the end of grade school into junior high, it has to shut off still. And they get jammed into these roles that are stifling for them. They want to be connected. Mm-hmm. Men in my practice, older men, it's so beautiful to see this like permission to feel moment when I work with them, and a woman to permission to have needs when those two things meet.
How powerful.
It's so powerful. It changes everything.
What a great place to bring our conversation to a close, even though I could ask you questions all day. One last thing I wanted to ask you, and this will have changed as you progress through your journey of mamahood, and is again changing now. As you said, you feel like you've kind of closed a chapter on your mama role, or it's evolving again. How do you today, and how did you, as you were solo mamaing, find your mama fuel? Where did you get your fuel, your nourishment?
Gosh, there's so many different things I could say about that. The first things first, whatever you can do to start your morning, not plugged into your devices, listening to the news, just with your laundry list of whatever. If you can take some time for yourself before, and I would do this when Will was really young, and don't tell yourself the story you don't have time, because we make time for things that are important to us, that support us. So I was a heavy duty meditator, and I would strangely find that the more meditation I did, the easier my life was, the better it flowed. Everything was so much. When I start my day in the energy of taking care of me and also focused on what I want to create that day, and I get all, in a state of connection to the divine, and I feel that support, and I'm not immediately taken off my center by what's happening out there. And all the fear, lack, limitation, scarcity stories that are just swirling around us 24/7. I'm really taking a break now from all of that. It's really toxic, and you don't understand when your nervous system is dysregulated. It's really hard to be there for your children, and you're all stressed out or whatever. That doesn't help them. It doesn't help you. So do what my MamaFuel is take care of me first. And another way to do that is take some breaks and get outside.
Yes,
like
connect to nature.
Nature
Vitamin
is the
N.
great, right? Is we have lost our connection, and so that rebalances me. And then reaching out and staying connected to the people that you love and support you, and you can do the same. It's just all of those pieces. Staying in a place of connection to your heart, which entrains everything else in your system. When you get all stressed out, it does some crazy stuff to your system. I've learned that time and time again. So that's what I do, is I take care of it. I remember even meditating is, I get up early, and Will would wake up, and he'd come out to the place that I meditate, and he would just quietly just lie in my lap.
Aww.
And fall back asleep. So you can do that.
Yeah.
You can do that. There are ways to, yeah. And so, and even if it's like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, if you're on the bus or in your commute or whatever it is that you're doing, just take care of you.
Those sacred, that's what Elena talks about, isn't it? Those sacred promises that you make to yourself and then hold to. Karolyn, thank you so much for taking time to speak with me today and sharing your beautiful experience and your heart and your hugely deep professional knowledge and your knowing. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. Thank you so much.
You. So grateful. And for everybody out there too listening to this podcast, please just share her love. This is a way we can support each other. I'm so grateful for you and the work that you're doing in the world.
Oh, thank you. I forgot to ask you, where can people find you if they want to find out more about your work?
I am on Facebook at Alchemy of Living, and also at my website, alchemyofliving.com.
Okay, I'll include those two links in the show notes. Thank you so much, Karolyn. I wish you a gorgeous rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
That's it for today's episode of MamaFuel, the podcast. Thanks for listening. There's a lot more conversation, sharing, and real mama talk happening in our private Facebook group. To join us, go to www.thecenteredmamaproject.com/Facebook and make sure you say hi when you get there. If you like this episode, or if you know a mama who could use a little mama fuel, I'd love you to share this episode and to rate and leave a review. Every comment helps, and it is always a delight to hear from you. Thanks, and bye for now.